NASA's Apollo mission discovered a huge pyramid on the dark side. Shocking truth revealed. The year was 1976. An ordinary day turned extraordinary as whispers spread through NASA like wildfire. Astronauts returning from the moon began reporting strange sightings: a colossal pyramid standing tall on the dark side, ancient and mysterious, its smooth surface gleaming in the faint light. Could it be a monument built by extraterrestrial hands? The very thought sent shivers down spines back on Earth. No one had ever seen anything like it before, a truth hidden from human eyes for eons. The mission had been old news, another climb into the starry void. But as photographs surfaced, the world was captivated. Engineers scrambled over the images, eyes wide and breaths held. The pyramid's edges were impossibly sharp, casting shadowy folds that seemed to vibrate with energy. What secrets lay concealed within? Echoes of an ancient civilization? Or maybe a trap set by beings who watched from afar? Amid the murmur of speculation, a chilling reality began to set in. People started disappearing. Astronauts who once shared laughs and dreams of discovery vanished without a trace. All anyone could find was an unsettling sense of dread hanging thick in the air. Was the pyramid calling to them? Pulling them closer into its sinister embrace? The news gripped the nation, drawing in millions eager to catch a glimpse of what lay hidden from view. Reactions poured in: fear, curiosity, glee, gripping hearts as debates ignited over the implications of what this structure could mean for humanity. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the clock ticked, tensions rose. A hush fell over the audience during news broadcasts. And then, a shocking revelation burst into the spotlight. A lone transmission from one of the lost astronauts had been recovered. It echoed through radios nationwide, its static laced with fear. It's not just a pyramid, it's awake. It wants us, the crowd gasped, hearts racing, pulses quickening. Was this a clue, or the end of hope as they knew it? Curiosity clawed at their chests, begging them to grasp what lay out of reach. But what was the truth behind that pyramid? Did it really hold the key to humanity's future? Or was it a doorway to their end? One thing was certain: the quest for answers was just beginning, and far more unimaginable than anyone could foresee. The excitement and dread reached a fever pitch. Night after night, the news cycle replayed that haunting message: it wants us, and the speculation morphed into panic. The public demanded answers, but NASA remained shrouded in silence, outlining their protocols as if the pyramid was simply another rock on the moon. But some knew it was much more than that. A small group of engineers, scientists, and conspiracy theorists banded together. They met in dimly lit rooms, poring over old maps of the moon, tying together fragments of information from secret missions and personal experiences. Everyone was whispering about the unknown, the unidentified. The atmosphere crackled with crazy energy, the kind that tells you something big is coming. Among them was Dr. Helen Carter, a brilliant astrophysicist with an unparalleled obsession with the cosmos. Her hands trembled as she slid a faded photo across the table. The pyramid, majestic and adorned with hieroglyph-like inscriptions, filled the space between them like a monolith in their midst. "This is real," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath, "and it's connected to something ancient, something powerful." "What if it's a weapon?" someone suggested nervously, wide eyes darting towards the window as if the moon wasn't so far away. "We have to warn everyone." "No," Helen replied firmly, shaking her head. "We can't panic. We need to know what we're dealing with. If it's awake, then we need to figure out how that's possible." The group's bold determination pushed them forward. Late-night meetings turned into a crusade as they delved into research, pulling at threads that tied the pyramid's origin to various civilizations on Earth. Speculations of ancient astronauts, lost technologies, and hidden histories filled the air, feeding their obsession. They theorized that the pyramid on the moon was perhaps a remnant of an extraterrestrial event that had been penned into myths and legends across the ages. As they linked the symbols from the moon with artifacts on Earth, a conclusion unfolded like a flower in bloom. If the pyramid was indeed awakened, it was reminiscent of past civilizations calling for guardians or warriors to shield them from impending doom. But then, fate dealt a cruel hand. Dr. Carter received a chilling message late one evening. Her colleague, John, who had been working on the mission, had vanished without a trace. He was last seen heading towards the launch site, the voice on the line warned. They say he heard something. A cold wave washed over Helen. The pyramid's not-so-innocent allure had drawn in another victim. Tension coiled tight inside her, like a string pulled on the brink of snapping. Who knew what dark forces lurked behind its shimmering facade? The group decided it was time to act. "We need to get back to the moon," she urged, her voice fierce. "If John found something, we need to find him before whatever has taken him finds us." The urgency felt palpable. Adrenaline surged through the night. However, as night melded into early dawn, doubts gnawed at Helen. She couldn't shake the feeling that the real terror wasn't the pyramid itself, but something else entirely. Something watching, waiting. With a breath, she whispered her fear aloud. What if the pyramid isn't welcoming us after all? As the team formed their plans, a distant rumble echoed across the world, the sound of something awakening beneath the surface. It would change everything and soon. But before they could set their course, Helen received one final piece of evidence that would either forge their destiny or lead to their doom. A cryptic note slipped under her door that read, "Get away. It knows you're coming." She stood frozen, heart racing in disbelief. What had they unleashed? What force was at play, and who could she trust? The answers loomed just out of reach, but there was one undeniable truth: they were running out of time. What lay ahead was murkier than ever, but one thing was clear: the journey to uncover the essence of the pyramid was only just beginning, and with each passing moment, whatever awaited them was getting closer. What if they weren't the only ones seeking the truth in the dark? The walls of the small meeting room felt as if they were closing in on Dr. Helen Carter. Her mind raced as she replayed the note in her head. "Get away. It knows you're coming." The words dripped with urgency that sent chills down her spine. Had they stirred something that was best left undisturbed? She gathered her scattered thoughts, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The group had poured hours into researching the pyramid, but now shadows loomed larger than ever. What had John discovered? Did he awaken something more sinister than they could have imagined? One of her colleagues, Mike, a seasoned engineer known for his calm demeanor, broke the silence. "We need to analyze the note. Who could have sent it?" "Maybe someone on the inside," Helen whispered, dread creeping into her tone. "What if NASA knows more than they're letting on?" The atmosphere thickened with dread. They exchanged glances, each reading the growing anxiety on the other's faces. The flickering light overhead seemed to mirror the uncertainty and fear swirling around them, but Helen fought to keep their spirits up. "We need to trust our instincts. There's something significant about this discovery. We can't abandon John." As reluctant agreement settled in, their excitement melded with a gnawing fear. The plan was set. They would return to the moon, but not without preparations. They were racing into the unknown, and that meant arming themselves with every scrap of knowledge they could muster. Days turned into sleepless nights as they feverishly collected information. Helen scoured archaeological reports, piecing together the significance of the hieroglyphs hinted in the photographs. "These aren't just symbols," she told the team, her hands shaking slightly as she pointed to a specific character that resembled an eye. "There's a pattern. Most of these are associated with guardian deities in ancient cultures. It's as though they prayed for protection or to ward off something terrible." "What was it they feared?" Mike asked, his brows knitted in concentration. "Something formidable. Maybe something trapped," she answered, her voice a whisper, heavy with implications. Days passed too quickly. The launch site buzzed with urgent energy, but tension crackled behind every interaction. Helen felt it in the way people glanced over their shoulders, lost in thoughts that drifted into darker realms. Her gut tightened more each day until she reached a breaking point. They boarded the spacecraft, and as it lifted off, a sense of foreboding gnawed at her. The Earth shrank below them, stripped of its safety, and she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching. Something was waiting for them. Approaching the moon now, the pilot's voice crackled through the speakers. Helen's heart raced as they broke through the thin atmosphere. The gray expanse of the lunar surface spread out beneath them, eerily serene. "There's the pyramid," she breathed, her eyes widening as its shadow loomed larger on the screen. "Something's off," Mike said abruptly, staring intently at the monitored readings. Close-up images revealed movement on the surface. Flickers of red and green lights danced around the pyramid like fireflies at dusk. "They must have some kind of energy signature," Helen murmured, entranced yet wary. "But why hasn't NASA mentioned this? Why are we seeing it now?" Before anyone could respond, the craft jolted violently. Alarms blared, and the cabin lights flickered ominously. The pilot yelled orders, trying to stabilize the ship against an unseen force. "Hold on tight." Helen's heart raced as a wave of darkness enveloped the cockpit. Panic surged through her as the harsh reality washed over them. They were not alone. "Something's here!" shouted one of her team. The craft shuddered again, slamming Helen against her seat. The pyramid loomed closer, drawing them in with a gravitational pull that both fascinated and terrified. The screen momentarily flickered back to life, revealing an eye that pulsed with an ancient power. It was awakening. As their shuttle spiraled dangerously close to the surface, Helen's mind blanked from fear and anticipation. What awaited them in that darkness? What had they truly ventured into? In that moment of chaos, Helen realized she might never find the answers John had sought or the truth behind the pyramid that beckoned them all with its silent, deadly call. She could only hope they weren't too late to escape its grasp, because whatever was down there was now aware of them. What if the greatest danger was yet to come? The impact was violently swift. The shuttle bucked beneath them, jolting Helen's stomach. She clutched her restraints, her knuckles white as she fought the rising tide of panic. The pilot struggled at the controls, beads of sweat forming on his brow. "Stabilize your grip," he barked, his voice shattering the growing silence. Alarms continued to scream, a cacophony of warning that only intensified the chaos inside. Helen watched the screen flicker between static and the eerie eye, each flash igniting an even deeper dread. "Cut the engines!" Mike's voice rose above the fray, his face pale. "We have to free ourselves from this pull." Before Helen could respond, the craft swung dangerously low, skimming the surface. The landscape rushed by, a barren wasteland illuminated by oncoming lights that danced in patterns, erratic and unsettling. A strange energy ran through the vessel, a hum reverberating through their bones. "Now!" Mike shouted, eyes darting back and forth between the readings and the unfolding scene outside. The pilot obeyed, yanking levers with desperate urgency. The engine abruptly quieted, but the inertia was relentless. They felt themselves being drawn toward the pyramid, its shadow looming larger than life. The second button Mike pressed glowed ominously on the panel. It was the emergency throttle. As power flickered through the craft, the escape velocity surged just enough to halt their descent. For a heart-stopping moment, they hung in the air, breath caught in their throats. Helen leaned closer to the window, her pulse racing. The pyramid, its ancient stone, was now fully illuminated, revealing strange carvings and inscriptions that seemed to glow with a horrible, internal light. "Look at that!" someone gasped, pointing at the markings. "It's similar to what we study back home." "Some kind of communication?" Mike speculated, his eyes wide with curiosity edged by fear. With dread, they all understood they were caught in its thrall. The eye pulsed again, as if it had been waiting for recognition. It turned toward them, a dark vortex of knowledge and power. They felt its awareness, as if it were a living entity scrutinizing their every move, deciphering their intentions. "Is it watching us?" Helen's voice quivered, and she could hardly breathe, her rational mind struggling against the visceral sensation of being preyed upon. "It knows we're here," Mike murmured, an unsettling realization washing over him. "How?" Before anyone could form a plan, a violent shockwave exploded from the pyramid, sending tremors through the craft. Energy crackled like a thunderstorm. They screamed as it rocked side to side, lights flickering dangerously. "Systems down!" the pilot shouted, shaking his head in disbelief. "We're losing everything." Gritting her teeth, Helen eyed the chaos around her. The newfound knowledge they'd pushed so hard to acquire was within reach, yet the primal fear of the unknown gripped her heart. "We need to recalibrate the navigation. Mike, I need your help." They frantically began to input commands, attempting to override and stabilize the craft. Yet every preparation felt inadequate against the sheer power of the pyramid's presence. "Is anyone getting a signal?" someone yelled, eyes darting back and forth as they struggled with their equipment. "We have to warn the base." Static filled their radios, overwhelming communication fell silent. Disquiet seeped into their thoughts like poison, a creeping fear that this was the end of everything they knew. "Something isn't right. We shouldn't be here." Another voice echoed the panic that now echoed amongst them. Outside, the bright light from the pyramid reached out, fingers of energy writhing like snakes, inching toward them. "Brace yourselves!" the pilot yelled again, as the craft lurched once more, tilting dangerously. Helen gripped the controls tighter. With their fate hanging by a thread, she wondered what if they were truly meant to awaken whatever darkness lay dormant beneath the surface. What if this was just the beginning of their encounter, as shadows twisted and light danced in a cruel display? Helen's heart raced. Would they break through, or were they already too late? What resided in the darkness, and how would they confront it? The scream of metal tearing through air shattered the tension, a jarring contrast to the chaotic quiet that had settled. Helen felt the vessel dip sharply, her stomach lurching once more as a loud thud reverberated throughout the cabin. "What was that?" someone gasped, eyes wide with terror. "Control failure." The pilot snarled, desperation etched across his face as he fought with the dying instruments. "The stabilizers are shot. We're losing altitude." Outside, the pyramid loomed oddly majestic yet terrifying, its pulsing energy spilling like molten gold, reaching out with an allure they could neither comprehend nor resist. Helen squinted against the blinding light, half terrified of the truth that crawled at the back of her mind. They weren't looking at an ancient structure. They were staring into the mouth of something wicked. "Please, not like this," she whispered, clutching her seat tighter, her nails digging into the frayed padding. A wave of panic washed over her. What if they didn't escape? How many times had she imagined this scene? So many dreams dashed against the stark reality of the moment. "Hold on!" the pilot barked as he desperately pulled the craft back from the brink, wresting control from the very forces undermining them. The shuttle fought and bucked, a maddened beast rebelling against its restraints. In the flickering light, Helen caught Mike's terrified gaze, his own panic reflected in wide eyes. He mouthed, "What do we do?" "Focus!" she shouted, scrambling to bring up the backup systems on her screen. The bright, scattered static mixed with the chaos outside, making every beep sound like impending doom. "We have to stabilize before." The thought hit her like a cold wave crushing down. Before what? Before what emerged from this ancient threshold. Before they became mere pawns in some cosmic game far beyond their understanding. A sudden jolt sent her sprawling forward. The ground beneath them shook violently. "No!" she screamed, fear choking her voice. "We can't go down like this." From the corner of her eye, she saw the light growing brighter, shifting in frequency as if breathing, drawing them in willingly for its feast. The markings on the pyramid glowed with an intense fury, the ominous shapes twisting into discernible forms that danced before them, a vision from a nightmare made real. "Can you read it?" Mike shouted amidst the chaos. "Any clues?" "Not here." Helen's heart raced as the static buzzed violently on her screen. They needed a nothing short of a miracle. Then, the swirling energy unleashed a pulse that struck the craft, knocking them out of sync. Mike flew back against his seat, while the cabin lights flickered and died, leaving them in near darkness, illuminated only by the pyramid's ominous glow. "Emergency lights!" the pilot shouted. "Activate them now!" panic nestled deeper into the fabric of their reality. Helen felt the world tilt at an unnatural angle as the pilot fought against the craft spiraling toward the ground. She clawed at electrical panels, desperately searching for any semblance of control while dread mounted. The world outside twisted into a tempest of light and shadow. Helen squinted, and just for a second she thought she saw figures moving within the light, a dance of silhouettes beckoning them, a sinister invitation to join whatever opened. "Hold on." The pilot's voice broke through her turmoil, full of steel and resolve. The ship shook violently as he pulled on the levers, a final desperate attempt to escape the pull of the pyramid. Then came the silence that swallowed them whole, the lull before chaos. Helen had but a heartbeat to brace herself. Would they break free or be consumed? In that moment of shuddering stillness, a horrifying revelation struck her. What if this was exactly what the pyramid wanted? The darkness swirled, promising answers that would shatter the very core of their reality. What awaited them on the other side of fear, and would they even survive to find out? The cockpit exploded back into life with blaring alarms and flickering emergency lights, jarring Helen back into the present with a pulse of panic thrumming in her veins. She couldn't recall ever being this terrified. Above her, the pilot gritted his teeth, wrestling with the controls like a madman battling demons. "Stabilizers aren't responding," he shot over his shoulder, voice strained. "Can you override them?" she yelled, desperation flooding her tone. "I'm trying." He squinted through the darkened screen, fingers flying over buttons, trying to coax life into the dying machinery. Each shudder of the craft felt like a countdown to disaster. She felt like a tightly wound spring, trembling as the world outside twisted and contorted. The pyramid loomed, more alive than before, pulsing with a rhythm that beat in time with her heart. They were sailing straight toward a vast maw of golden energy, and if instinct served, it thirsted for them. Mike's voice cut through her thoughts. "We're losing altitude fast." The panic in his voice spiked her own fear, only adding to the treacherous grip around her chest. "Helen, what do we do?" Glancing back at her screen, she noticed static crackling, sharper now, a mindless shriek of interference. "We need to reboot the systems." "If we can do that," the words fell away as a violent jolt threw them sideways, slamming her head against the screen. Stars exploded in her vision, pain blooming as she fought for consciousness. She blinked rapidly, waiting for clarity to return. "Hang in there." The pilot's voice had grown shriller, mingling with the sound of the failing engines struggling to hold on. The ship pitched again, and Helen braced for the worst, fighting the panic rising like bile in her throat. If they could just stabilize in time. "Please, just work," she muttered under her breath, fingers dancing over the flickering panels. The cabin lights flickered back to life, casting jagged shadows against the walls. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw the faces again, the ghostly silhouettes swirling in the pyramid's golden light. "Do you see that?" she said, a chill creeping up her spine. "See what?" Mike's eyes darted around, radar wide with fear. "The figures. In the light." It's her words turned to vapor, fading in the wake of another violent shudder. This one sent Mike tumbling off his seat, arms flailing helplessly as he struggled to get back upright. Helen instinctively reached out, grabbing him by the collar to help him regain his balance. "Stay with me," she snapped, her voice carrying an edge of frenzy. The pilot's curses punctuated the chaos. "I can't keep this up for much longer. It feels like we're..." But before he could finish, a blinding flash lit the cabin. The pyramid's pulse synced with the ship's trembling, a feeling of merging that spiraled into a sinewy horror. All at once, it felt like gravity shifted, the ground beneath them bending and swaying like they were caught up in some otherworldly dance. A haunting whisper echoed within her mind. "Join us." It felt seductive, eerily comforting. "We have to break free now," Helen yelled, wrestling to keep a grip on reality, her heart hammering in her chest. They were sinking into an abyss painted in terror and allure. The pyramid's embrace felt tantalizing yet sinister. Outside, shapes flickered in and out of view, grasping hands yearning for them. The realization hit like a shockwave. Not only did they have to escape the descent, they also had to resist whatever that place was begging them to do. Would the ship hold long enough for them to break away? Would they crawl back to safety, or would their names echo with those lost to the golden abyss? Before the question loomed large in her mind, the ship lurched again, and this time, it felt different, filled with a crushing inevitability. The lights blinked out once more, leaving them to face the unknown. What is this place turning into? Helen whispered in horror, but it was drowned out by the cacophony of alarms and distant echoes, as if the pyramid itself was answering her. Would they emerge from this transformed or become forever entangled in its dark desire? The darkness swallowed them whole, a thick, suffocating blanket that pressed against their throats. Each alarm blared like a desperate wail, cutting through the void and escalating the sense of panic. Helen could barely breathe, her chest tightening as her pulse raced to a chaotic beat. "Reboot!" she screamed again, her voice fraying at the edges. The pilot's frantic movements caught her attention. He was scrambling between screens, his face drenched in sweat. "Hold on!" he shouted, eyes wild. With a lurch that sent her stomach to her throat, the craft twisted violently, and Helen gripped the edge of her console like a lifeline. She could feel the metallic surface biting into her palms, grounding her in the chaos. Outside, shapes twisted in shadows, swirling around the craft like ravenous beasts. "Are you seeing that?" Mike shouted as he wrestled back into his seat, the fear twisting his features. "The figures, they're back." She breathed, the images cut sharper than glass in her mind. The faces. They were reaching for her, beckoning with an unsettling familiarity, their mouths moving in silent pleas. "Focus, Helen! We need to override it," she urged, cutting him off. "Don't let it take you." But the urgency in her voice didn't seem to register. The ship shuddered again, drawing them closer to the golden light that radiated an inviting warmth too inviting. The whispers crescendoed like a choir of lost souls, tempting and taunting, tugging at her sanity. "Join us," the echo wrapped around her like a coil, tightening further. "No! I won't give in!" Helen fumbled at her controls, frantically working to push the ship back to stability. Every moment felt like a cruel joke, time stretching and warping. She barely registered the sounds of Mike's breath as he gasped. "Do you feel that?" he said, eyes darting back to the screen. It's like they're inside my head." She shot him a fierce look. "Fight it. Don't let that thing win." The cabin shook with violent intensity, and the lights flickered ominously. For a split second, the figures outside dimmed, revealing the majestic structure before them with impossible clarity. The pyramid's surface gleamed like liquid gold, a beacon of eerie beauty. The air felt electric, humming with energy that made her skin prickle. "Incoming turbulence!" The pilot's voice didn't carry the usual authority. It cracked under pressure, almost pleading. Suddenly, the ship pitched downward with a bone-rattling force. Helen felt her heart drop as they spiraled, the controls sparking against her hands. She was slipping, losing her grip on the reality she had known. Panic clawed at her throat. She threw herself forward. "Please! Reboot the system before it's too late." The ship trembled as if responding to her desperation. "No! Don't give up!" Mike yelled, watching helplessly as warning lights ceased to blink on their screens, a haunting silence replacing the noise. Then there came the unmistakable sound of the engines sputtering towards silence. "Not now," she whispered, tearing her gaze back to the pyramid. She couldn't let herself be entranced by it again. Just then, a soft pulse of light flashed from the pyramid, striking their ship like a bolt of lightning. An electric jolt surged through her, a visceral punch that threw her against the panel. For a fleeting moment, her mind connected, a spark igniting understandings she might not be ready to face. Shadows flickered in her periphery, objectifying the horror creeping back in. "What if it's trying to communicate?" she thought, dismayed. "What if it wants us as vessels?" "Fight it," she managed, pulling herself back to the present. "We have to fight it together." And before she could question the power of her resolve, the ship shuddered one last time like a massive heart giving out, and the world outside dimmed again, swallowing them into darkness. With the echoes of the pyramid raging in her ears, a chilling realization struck. They might be racing towards not just destruction, but a transformation that could change everything they believed. As the silence enveloped them, a new sound emerged, soft yet distinct, a whisper. It felt like an invitation, an echoing promise. "What do you want from us?" Helen breathed, glancing across at Mike, the fear of their fate swimming in his wide eyes. The reply lingered in the air, like a persistent wisp of smoke. To become one. Would they shatter the chains binding them, or succumb to the whispering call that clawed at their minds? The darkness was thick, but inside the cockpit, tension crackled like live wires. Helen's heart raced, echoing in her ears as that whisper pulsed again, heavy with ancient urgency. To become one, it reverberated through her bones, promising an understanding that felt both terrifying and alluring. "Don't listen!" she shouted, shaking her head as if that would drive it away. Mike's hands gripped his seat tightly, knuckles white, eyes wide with both fear and wonder. "Helen, what if it's telling the truth? What if we're meant to be part of this?" His voice wavered, torn between disbelief and an inexplicable pull toward that seductive glow. "No! This isn't a choice, it's manipulation," Helen countered vehemently, fighting against the creeping sense of inevitability. She forced herself to focus, reorienting her thoughts amidst the chaos. They were standing on the precipice of something profound and horrifying. Suddenly, a violent lurch cut through her meditation on the crisis. Screeches filled the cabin as alarms blared, signaling the last of their dwindling power. "We're going down!" the pilot screamed, his hands battling the controls in a losing endeavor. "We can't land like this. We need to reboot," Helen cried, feeling her sanity slip. She slammed her fist on the panel, desperation fueling her movements. "Power's down!" The pilot spat, panic evident on his face. "We're losing systems." Inside her, fear ignited like wildfire, spreading swiftly. "We can't just accept this fate. We must find a way to resist." Helen fought against the swell of despair that threatened to drown her. She turned her gaze to Mike, pleading. "You can't let it in, Mike. Stay with me." But as they spiraled downward, the golden structure cloaked in mist loomed larger, exuding a power that tugged at her very essence. Those figures outside were not just shadows anymore, they were reflections of her scattered past, distant memories rising to the surface like ghosts seeking closure. "Join us. No, you don't belong here," she shouted, gnashing her teeth and forcing her voice to cut through the cacophony of lost souls. Though her body trembled, her spirit burned brighter, a shield against the oppressive darkness. Then the craft caught an updraft, lifting, scooping them back from the brink. The lights flickered back to life for a brief moment, revealing glimpses of the faces outside. Their mouths moved in synchronized rhythm, casting an alluring spell that twisted reality. Helen could see them clearer now, desperate eyes locking on hers. Desolation and longing rippling through their forms, drawing her in deeper. "We are your past," one figure mouthed, its transparent features morphing before her. "Let us guide you." "Stop it!" Helen shrieked, her voice raw and frayed. The figures recoiled, hostility flashing within the kernel of desperation, and the harmonious whispers turned into a dissonant choir. It was as if a dam had burst, the balance tipping dangerously toward chaos. "Look out!" Mike yelled, pointing with rising dread as jagged shapes surged closer, their hands stretching toward the cabin. "Prepare for impact!" The pilot barked, his tone switching from fear to resolute determination. He activated the emergency systems, clutching at the controls like a lifebuoy. The engines roared defiantly, pushing against the dark tide, but Helen felt time slow. The ship pitched violently beneath her, the gravitational pull of the unseen was overpowering, and she was consumed by the pull. "Fight it!" she screamed at Mike one more time. They hurtled towards the unknown, an apex between light and shadow, toward the pyramid that shimmered with a predatory promise. As the walls of the cockpit trembled violently, Helen's mind raced. Would they break through the veil, escaping into freedom, or would they become forever entangled in the labyrinth of that choice whispered by the void? The cabin popped with tension as the unknown awaited them. What awaited them at that grand structure? Would answers lead them to salvation, or would they be drawn into a fate darker than they could imagine? The cockpit erupted into chaos as the controls bucked violently. The ship was at the mercy of unseen forces, tossing them like a rag doll caught in a tempest. Helen's breath came in jagged gasps, her mind racing with one thought: survival. Brace for impact. The pilot shouted, his voice swallowed by the mechanical roar outside. Helen's eyes darted around, searching for some glimmer of hope. There! A manual override switch, glinting green under the emergency lights. "I can get us out!" she screamed, tearing her gaze from the hypnotic pyramid, refocusing on reality. Mike looked at her, uncertainty clouding his features. "Do it! Please!" The ship tilted again, creating a surge of weightlessness that sent her body lurching. She gripped the panel to steady herself and, without hesitation, reached for the switch. The thickness of fear prickled at her skin, but she could feel the fiery determination building within her. "Here goes nothing." With that, she flipped the switch. The ship responded instantly, systems whirring back to life with a low, mechanical hum, control panels blinking warmly. But the pyramid and ethereal sentinel remained an unwavering presence outside. The light pulsing from its apex became a cacophony of whispers, wrapping around them, reaching for her very soul. "Let go," they beckoned, their voices weaving through her mind like ivy strangling a tree. "Join us," she grit her teeth, forcing the sound out. "No! I won't join anything. You're not real." A sudden burst of energy surged through the cockpit as the ship jerked free of its downward spiral. The pyramid loomed ominously, but the ground below shifted, becoming a swirling mass of shadows and raging winds. Helen and Mike exchanged a look, both feeling the weight of that decision between dark allure and piercing clarity. "Climb! Get us clear of the glide path," Mike urged, his voice steadied by newfound resolve. The pilot's hands moved deftly over the controls, pulling the ship upwards against the tempest-like winds. But even as they ascended, the dark forms outside swirled violently, casting ghastly shadows that flickered like lightning. Suddenly, cracks of thunder echoed around them, and the ship jolted violently as if it had just collided with an unseen wave. Alarms blared again, more insistent now, as the cabin shook like a cage rattled by a wild beast. "Not again!" the pilot shouted, battling against the controls. "We're losing altitude. We have to," and then it happened. The crystal-clear glass of the cockpit shattered, as if the very pyramid was rejecting their escape. Shards flew through the air like deadly shooting stars, and screams erupted. The cabin felt like a war zone torn apart as wind screamed through the opening. Helen and Mike braced against the chaos, hearts hammering. Glass shards embedded around them like tiny, glistening stars. A large piece grazed Helen's cheek, drawing blood. "Stay low!" she yelled, her instincts kicking in. "What's the plan now?" Mike shouted as he crouched low, his voice barely audible over the roar. "Back to the switch." She could barely keep her thoughts straight, but she felt the pull of desperation. The manual override was their only chance at peace, or whatever lay beyond that polygonal mass of power. As they braced for impact, Helen grabbed Mike's arm, locking eyes. The glue of their shared terror held them together. "Whatever happens, don't let go, okay?" But before he could respond, the entire cockpit began to spiral downward, sucked into a wild whirlpool of energy cascading from the pyramid. Time folded, and events moved in slow motion. All that was left was a choice: let themselves be consumed or fight with every bit of their beings for a hope that seemed distant. "Hold on!" the pilot cried one last time, his voice shaking. In a blink, they descended like falling stars, spinning into the heart of darkness. What awaited them within that spiraling madness? Freedom? Or the final embrace of ruin? Helen's pulse raced in time with the beckoning glow, and the answer loomed ever closer. The impact felt like a drumbeat of fate. The shuttle crashed into the pyramid's hard surface, jarring them against their seats, the loud crunch echoing through the cockpit. Dust and debris swirled, settling slowly around them like a shroud. Gasping for air, Helen blinked against the dim light, heart thudding in her chest. They were inside. "Is everyone okay?" The pilot's voice was shaky, mingled with disbelief, as he pulled himself up from the wreckage. Mike clambered over debris, concern etched deep across his features. They were battered but alive. Helen struggled against the tightness in her chest, looking around the dim interior of the pyramid as shadows flickered in the corners of her vision. Images of figures emerged in the darkness, watching, wanting. She could still feel it, that insidious pull, drawing them towards something deeper. Stay sharp, Helen hissed as adrenaline coursed through her. She reached for the emergency packs as Mike scanned the area, eyes darting at every sound, every flickering shadow. A whisper prowled the air. Come to us, it beckoned, enticing and terrifying. It made Helen's skin crawl. They had barreled into the heart of the unknown, and the very structure seemed to pulse with anticipation. Focus on the task, she urged, rallying them. We need to regroup and find a way to communicate with the base. If it is aware of us, there's a chance, just a chance, we can get through. Together they stumbled through the ancient hallways, illuminated by the flickering glow from ethereal energy embedded deep in the stone. Walls etched with strange symbols unfurled around them. Each step resonated, a reminder of the stories trapped within. Sarah, another team member, suddenly gasped, pointing to an engraving that depicted a celestial battle. It's a warning. A warning of what? Mike leaned closer, tracing the patterns with trembling fingers. He felt the air thrum, a current of energy weaving around them. Their moment of contemplation shattered, the whispers escalated, growing desperate. Join us. Fulfill your destiny. Helen stepped back, heart racing. No! This isn't a home, it's a prison. In that moment, a low, rumbling echoed, as if the structure itself was responding to her outcry. The hall trembled, and for a second, shadows flickered ominously. We need to get out, shouted the pilot. It's unstable. Determined, Helen made a decision. We can't leave without understanding. We have to confront whatever this is. If it's a choice between joining and fighting, we choose to fight. Set up a communication link, Mike called, pulling cables from his pack. We have to warn Earth. As they worked hastily, the pulsing energy transformed the air into a storm. The voices grew angry, foolish mortals. You do not belong. Sweat trickled down her brow as they connected the communication devices, frantically inputting coordinates to reach NASA. Please work. Then, they caught sight of it. The iron imposing presence hovering in the air above them, shifting colors, scanning their forms. A wave of dread washed over Helen. Do you see what I see? Mike whispered, eyes wide in awe and terror. Keep working. Don't look at it, she commanded, though she herself fought the urge to turn. Just then, the communication panel flickered to life. A crackle of static buzzed through the lines, a voice breaking through the chaos. Carter? This is Mission Control, do you copy? Yes. We're alive. Her voice felt too small amid the whirlwind. We're inside the pyramid, but it's alive? What do you mean? Came the static response. It wants us. It's calling to us. The fear clawed through her. She refused to let it consume her. But before she could continue, the pyramid groaned, walls vibrating under unseen pressure. Hold on. The pilot barked, as fissures opened beneath them, threatening to plunge them into the abyss. Activate your emergency beacons, Mission Control urged. We'll trace your signal. But you must get out. In that moment, clarity hit Helen. We might be the key to stopping whatever this is. She shot an imploring gaze at her crew. If we confront the together, we can break this hold. Taking deep breaths, they formed a line, crossing the threshold into the heart of the gaze. The energy shifted around them, hovering expectantly. Join us, it whispered again, and at that moment, Helen did something extraordinary. Embracing that ancient pull, she reached forward. No! We are not yours. We are our own. The split-second silence hung heavily, and then, the pyramid shuddered violently. Light exploded outward, and shadows bloomed like petals. The eye flashed, flickering from eyes of promise to something sinister, then vanishing into a storm of light. Now! Everyone focus! Helen shouted, feeling an energy surge into their bodies, pulling them toward a fractured reality and tugging at the threads of their lives. The pyramid trembled, crying as they held their ground. With every ounce of will, they stood united against the thrumming presence, fighting back with defiance. Swirling colors bled into existence, shadows recoiled, and that seductive chorus turned shrill. The ground erupted. The eyes shattered into fragments of light, and shadows spewed forth, howling around them. They were wrapped in the force of that wailing presence, but they were free. Light pierced the darkness like a knife, and with the last echoes of defiance, the pyramid began to collapse, folding inward as if its very essence was unraveling. They stumbled backward through the chaos, rushing to escape the turmoil as it imploded around them. With a final lurch, they staggered through a crack in the wall, finding themselves outside, breathless and alive. The moon glimmered quietly above, the looming monstrosity of the pyramid now a crumbling memory. Glimpses of their shared trauma, of what they had won and lost, passed between them like unspoken words. Did we win? Mike asked, breathless. Helen nodded, her heart still racing. We fought back. We chose to face the darkness. They shared a quiet moment, knowing they had confronted something profound. Yet, the weight of the pyramid's history lingered in the starry night, a reminder of the dark whispers that would always echo behind their perceptions. Let us go home, Helen implored. As they stepped away, the moon lay silent, marking their departure a conscious witness to wild truths of their existence. But still, the stories remained. She could feel the urge to recount the mysteries they had uncovered echoing softly in the back of her mind. Something enormous lingered in those shadows they had left behind. A unified breath echoed as they began the journey back home, marking an end and a beginning, a final exhale for that chapter but a promise for all that lay ahead. This isn't the end. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. This is the moment to show your support for our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories.